Good morning, everybody. We are here again, another week, another webinar. Thank you all for being patient while we let you in. We'll just make sure we've got everything set up and ready for today's session because it's going to be highly interactive. There's going to be lots to talk about. Thank you and good morning to everybody that is joining us again live for another Friday webinar with the club. Today we're with one of our trusted collaborators and partners, WAY Trustees. John, good morning. Thank you for joining.
Morning, how are you?
Good morning, Craig. As today we have got a packed out session, a ton of content. I'm going to just get started right away. So apologies, but let's get going. So the webinar today, we do plan for it to run for the full hour. Please do use the chat function as much as you like. We're going to try and answer as many questions as we can as we go along, but we're also going to block out some time towards the end for a Q&A session. Our objective today is to deliver the content for you within the hour. Feedback is so important to us. So when you leave the webinar, there will be a feedback form for you to complete. Please do take 2 minutes to complete that feedback form. It will give John some feedback on his presentation, and there will be a couple of questions that will invite you to get involved with the club and WAY Trustees as well. So please do take the time to complete the survey. So let's get straight into it. We've always got a good mix of club members and community members that come along to our webinars. So for the purpose of people joining us for the first time, and apologies to those that join us on a regular basis, but here I go again. I'm Lee, one of the co-founders of the Financial Planning Club. We provide one-to-one business consultancy tailored to each and every individual's business over a 12-month period. Alongside that, we do a whole load of other stuff to support every single financial planning professional, from in-person events, webinars, podcasts, partner discount tools, and valuable resources. There is a place for everybody within our club. Just touching briefly on the club membership for business owners, we've got an awesome group of business owners currently going on a journey with the club. Everything starts with a brand new or a refreshed 3-year business plan. We break that down into a 12-month roadmap and then actioning 90-day accountability sprints. If you don't have a plan, how do you know where you're going to go and how you're going to get there? Everything we do centers around accountability and collaboration. So in a nutshell, if you're looking to shake things up, if you want to implement some new ideas and you want to set yourself some really good grounded business goals, please do speak to us at the club. We'd love to be able to support and help you on your journey. At the end of the day, you will get an email from us that will give you a link to the recording of this webinar. There will be a scorecard on there as well. Participate in the scorecard, test your business, and find out if and how the club can support you. For the past 2 years, we've hosted thriving WhatsApp communities. Some of you and many of you are amongst that community. We do split the communities into separate groups to really keep those conversations relevant and focused. People love being a part of our communities. Without a doubt, somebody has been there, done it, seen it, and navigated particular challenges. So if you're going through a particular sticky part of your business, or if you've got some clients and some hurdles that you want to sort of climb over, please do ask the community. They are a participating bunch that would love to help you. Don't waste time when somebody else has already got the answers for you. Again, at the end of the webinar, there will be a little part that says on the survey, there will be a little part within the survey that will ask you what community you'd like to be a part of, if you'd like to be a part of any. The club is on tour, so we do have 2 in-person events lined up. These are exclusive for business owners and standalone self-employed advisors who are wearing multiple caps at one time. We had 60 people in the room a few weeks ago in London. It was an absolute hit with everybody that came along. So on Friday, the 26th of September, we are coming to Leeds, followed by Friday, the 28th of November, we are in Birmingham. The agenda is absolutely stacked. We're going to be showing you how to build client referral schemes that actually work. We are going to be winning and retaining clients across multiple generations, and we are going to enable you to rediscover your why through a highly interactive personal motivators session. So everything we do at our events is collaborative and interactive. Sitting and listening is simply not possible. 5 hours of CPD, and it is completely free to come along to our in-person events. I'm nearly there, guys. Bear with us. We've got a couple of webinars lined up. Got a really good one on Tuesday next week. Tuesday at 4 p.m. We are exploring your client's beliefs, emotions, and behaviours that shape financial decisions. And then we've got another webinar following that on Friday, the 15th of August. So a little bit of downtime from us whilst we prepare for our next webinar with Bear Rock. And this is about quality advice and financial planning firms, how you can gain a commercial advantage through embracing compliance. This is going to be a really, really good webinar as well. So please do come along to our webinar as you have done so today. We couldn't do what we do without the support and the amazing participation of our collaborators. Each and every one of the businesses that you see in front of us play a key role in the success of our club members that are going through or currently looking for change within their business. All share a commitment to driving the industry forward. Their expertise, their passion, their innovation really do help make a big difference. So again, a massive shout out to everybody now collaborating with the club. So before I pass you over to John Humphreys, who is the Business Development Manager at WAY Trustees, John has over 35 years experience supporting professional advisors with family wealth preservation and intergenerational tax planning. So if you have any questions today, John and Mark, who are in attendance today, are the guys you need to be asking your questions to. When you registered, you'd have noticed that we gathered a bit of information from you, and I wanted to share that back with you all today. So who is with us? The majority of the audience are advisors and planners, 65% of the audience. 25% or 26% are directors and those within leadership roles. Then a few others that fall into sort of power planning, administration, ops. I think there's a couple of accountants in the room as well. Your confidence in your IHT knowledge is pretty good. We're there. Average score of 7.4 out of 10. Hopefully we'll be 10-10 at the end of this webinar. Most feel confident, competent, but eager for deeper expertise. The compliance approach is that the majority are not waiting for budget confirmation on pensions and business relief changes. So that shows you are a proactive bunch in approaching client planning. So this question was interesting. So we talked about the use of multiple trusts, and we found that some of you guys and girls found a loophole. So we asked the question, are you using multiple trusts? 30% said yes, 22% said no, 7% said sometimes. And then we've got 40% sitting in the other category. People have worked out simply putting a ... avoids that question, which is very interesting. But John, thank you for joining us. Is this the overall census of the industry? Do you see this a lot in terms of the use of multiple trusts and people's confidence around their sort of IHT knowledge at the moment?
Very much so. Yeah, multiple trusts we're finding as we get into the context of the presentation, but we'll see it more with regards to the consumer duty rules for foreseeable harm, and that's really been a massive prompt really in looking at multiple trusts and not just concentrating on working in piecemeal over a period of time. So we've definitely seen a huge shift in that since the consumer duty rules came in. Good stuff,
good stuff. Well, the floor is yours. I will stop the sharing of my screen so that you can take over and take everybody through the wonderful world of IHT planning today.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. It's greatly appreciated. It's fantastic to be with you all again. Our subject today is mind and knowledge gap. Are you missing IHT opportunities? And that really leads on from what the questions that Lee's just gone through with you. So let's look at the agenda and learning objectives for today. We'll look at consumer duty, and particularly foreseeable harm, and the aspects of that and why that's driving this use of multiple trusts now. We'll look at an October 2024 budget summary and look at the changes that are being implemented for inheritance tax, particularly looking at BPR, APR and pensions. We'll look at the IHT position of pensions post 6th of April 2027, which we've genuinely seen this massive explosion in inquiries as a result of those changes, and people's pensions being in a situation where they'll form part of their IHT assessable estate and residence nil rate band assessable estate, I hasten to add, post April 2027. We'll look at how the way inheritor trust can help with this conundrum, the optimum order of trust settlements, and we'll look at a case study at the end to bring it all together.
Brilliant. John, just before you move on, just your microphone, whereabouts is it? Just because the voice seems a little bit intermittent, a little bit crackly. Where's your microphone? Is it on your laptop you're using?
It's on my camera. So
on your camera.
A bit further forward, in fact, if I just switch off my camera, I can then bring the microphone closer to me. That will be a bit easier then, probably be less crackly. Is that better now?
That seems a little bit better. If anyone else has got any issues, please do let us know. But hopefully that's resolved it. Thanks, mate.
No
yep, fair enough. Thank you.
So let's look at consumer duty foreseeable harm in a bit more detail. So to say that the consumer duty rules include this aspect of foreseeable harm, and foreseeable harm includes detrimental tax implications and access to money. So it's very important that we look across the client's assets to determine what their total IHT position is, and also things that could be left in the estate if we don't do some planning with them that are going to create an ongoing problem and start to generate income. So one of the things, not so much income, sorry, investment growth. So one of the things that often gets overlooked is ISAs. It's not uncommon for us to find people who've got £1 million plus in ISAs, particularly if they've been doing them, since the days of PEPs and into ISAs and maximising out their contributions. It's very common for us to find, significant holdings in ISAs. And clients have this mindset that they are so tax advantageous that they don't want to touch them. But of course, they're forming part of the IHT assessable estate, as will things like a general investment account. And what we don't want to do is leave that money sat inside the estate, continuing to accumulate in value, and therefore creating a detrimental tax implication, which could be then a foreseeable harm issue. So it's important that we look at the client's assets in the round to make sure we're not leaving assets inside the estate and only planning with part of the assets and not all of the things that could be used in a more tax efficient manner. And access to money can be absolutely critical in later life to pay for care. So if we're going into a trust or gifting money away directly that's got no reversionary interest, you've lost access to that money, and that could be crucial at the back end when you come to pay for care in later life if it's required. And again, that could be a foreseeable harm issue if that hasn't been taken into account, when you're looking at the client's assets and estate and how you're going to conduct the IHT plan. So to remain compliant and deliver good client outcomes, the advisor's file should include all of these things. So you looked at alternative IHT planning options, and all those things were considered and discounted with reasons for why they were discounted. Assess the impact of ISA growth on a future estate as well as general investment account growth, and look at ways in which you can mitigate that and what options you explore to mitigate that. And include a justification for any IHT planning recommendation in the context of the client's wider financial position. So all of those things are crucial. And they demonstrate that you've considered the foreseeable harm aspects of the planning that you're proposing to put in place, not just the immediate planning benefits of what you've recommended. So it's about looking forward to make sure all those things are there. From a budget perspective, we've seen significant changes announced. So we've seen that the main nil rate band and residence nil rate band, the freeze has been extended through to 2030. So that was originally set to expire, the freeze on that on 6th of April 2028, but that now has gone through to 2030. And if we consider that the main nil rate band hasn't increased since 2009, that has resulted in obviously many more estates becoming part of the IHT assessable estates. We've also got changes to agricultural property relief and business relief, and there's been lots of comment about these two being mashed together, if you pardon that expression. You can get 100% IHT relief on the first million, and then it's 50% thereafter. And of course, there's been lots of commentary, discussion, particularly from the farming community, and I totally understand why, with regards to this particular change and how it will affect farms passing down generations. The thing I would point out, it's £1 million each. So again, if the farm is held correctly, so if you've got a married couple, for example, if they're holding the farm 50-50, they've got £1 million each. If only one of them is holding the assets in the farm, and the plan was on their demise, they would pass it to their surviving spouse, it would use a spousal exemption, of course, there wouldn't be any IHT to pay. but you've lost £1 million of allowance. So it's absolutely crucial that the ownership of the farm is looked at to make sure they get £1 million of allowance each. Then bear in mind they've got 325 and no rate band each as well to add. So it's £2.65 million that they could have in allowances if they hold the farm correctly and they hold the assets correctly, or even if it's a business, if they hold the business correctly and the business assets get split in 50-50 for the married couple or civil partnership. Crucial bit of planning. And that's largely a paper exercise. And there's not going to be any tax to pay when you're passing assets between spouses either. So it's crucial that that is looked at. Beyond that, we're only going to get 50% IHT relief on unlisted shares such as AIM in all circumstances. Now, I've seen quite a lot of the AIM providers talking about moving clients out of AIM over to shares that will qualify for business relief going forward, up to £1 million. My suggestion to advisors, if you're thinking about doing that, will be to do that sooner rather than later. And the reason for that is the fact that if all of the providers are suggesting that that's something that should be considered to maintain that 100% IHT relief on those that have qualified, if everybody leaves it to the last minute, it could be difficult for all of these companies to cope with all the redemptions. So I think it's crucial that if you're thinking about doing that, to consider doing that sooner rather than later and not leaving it until March next year when there might be a bit of a mad scramble as everybody's trying to do it at the same time. The agricultural property relief and the business relief, so I understand why there's been lots of comment and commentary on that, particularly for older clients who have not got the likelihood of being able to survive 7 years, to gift the assets and survive for 7 years. So that is where I think it's particularly tricky. For those that have got that life expectancy, of course, they could start gifting parcels of land, parcels of shares, etc., over to the kids, grandkids, etc. Survive the 7 years, it's outside of their estate. So they've got time to do the planning. It's those that haven't got that time, I think I feel the sorriest for, without a doubt, with these proposed changes. But the big one by a country mile is the big change to pension benefits. Prior to April 2015, of course, pensions did form part of the IHT assessable estate, and then they were taken out, and now they're coming back in again. But this is going to be, the enormous change. And when we look in a second at the stats that the HMRC are projected to receive, it's just mad when you start to look at the sums of money. So this is the additional projected IHT as a result of these measures. So freezing a nil rate band, of course, there's no additional amount coming in until we get to 2028, 29 when the extended freeze kicks in. Then you've got the changes to APR and BPR coming in April 2026, going from 230 million to a projected 520. But look at the pensions. Pensions one is massive. Projected revenue 640 million, rising to 1.46 billion pounds. And that's additional revenue that they're projecting that they're going to receive, in addition to the 8 billion pounds that was already received last year in IHT. And of course, that's climbing year on year because of this freeze in the allowances. So what does it mean post-budget? Well, there's going to be greater importance on lifetime gifting, either into trust or directly to children, so grandchildren. Of course, we're going to promote gifting into trust because that's what we do. We're going to see more effective planning on first death, and we should see more of that, and that should continue because of the fact that you've got frozen allowances. And of course, if the assets are continuing to go up in value and you're just passing it on to a surviving spouse or civil partner using the spousal exemption, those assets, if they continue to go up in value, are just going to continue to outstrip nil rate bands, etc. So it makes sense to consider less reliance on a spousal exemption and actually start to use nil rate bands and residence nil rate bands on first death. And then we've also got to factor in there the whole consumer duty, emissions and foreseeable harm aspects of the planning as well, to make sure that we optimize the IHT planning for that particular client when we look at their total asset value. So we'll just have a very quick run through of some of the great wealth transfer statistics that are around. £5.5 trillion set to pass between the generations in the next 30 years, which is just eye-watering sum of money. I mean, it is real monopoly money. That is just a huge, huge sum of money. The IHT receipts last year, as I say, were £8.25 billion, and that was up from the previous year. We've seen an average IHT bill increase of 11.5%. IHT receipts are projected to rise to 15 billion in the next 10 years. And 19% of the population are likely to be 65 plus by 2050. Oh, sorry, 19% of the UK population 65 plus now, rising to 25% by 2050. And then we all know that residential care homes are expensive, and therefore people are sometimes reluctant to give away money because the thing in their head is, I might need it. And I totally understand that thought process. But at the moment, 1 in 4 people require residential care at some point during their lifetime, which by definition means 3 in 4 people don't. That will increase as we've got an aging population. But what we don't want is people leaving a huge sum of money sat inside their inheritance tax assessable estate to pay for care. And either they don't need it or they don't need it for very long. Because again, the average stay in a care home is somewhere between 24 and 36 months. We don't want to leave hundreds of thousands of pounds sat inside the estate to pay for care. And they either don't need it or they don't need it for very long. And of course, what clients often forget is when they go into residential care, all of their income is then going to pay for their care. So they haven't got council tax to pay, they haven't got the utility bills to pay, etc. All of the normal household running expenses because they're now in a care home. So all of their income's going to that. So what we're really looking at is the shortfall and how we can fund that shortfall. So consumer duty will also include deed of variation, and it is imperative that this is considered. And it's the first thing that Mark and I would always look at when we start to have discussions with an advisor on a case where we find out that the client has recently inherited some money. First question is always, how long ago was it? Was it within the last 2 years? And if it is, can we do a deed of variation to take that money away from the estate immediately? And it's deemed it's never been theirs. So anybody's got an IHT liability, we should be looking at that and asking that question. If you don't discuss a deed of variation, that could be an omission under the consumer duty and their rules, and therefore could lead to foreseeable harm because it wasn't something that was considered. So I had a case recently, for example, where a lady already had an IHT liability. She was a tad over £2 million already as a residence nil rate band assessable estate. And she just inherited £750,000 when her mother passed away. And I said to the advisor, well, the first thing we need to do is do a deed of variation. Let's get that £750,000 away from her estate. It can still go into a discretionary trust from which she could benefit from, her and her children could benefit from. And even better if we can make that trust have the ability to loan money to the beneficiaries if she ever needed it. In all likelihood, this lady was never going to require this money. And if we'd have let that money just land in her estate, it would have taken away all of her residence nil rate band immediately. But if we can vary it, get that money outside of her estate, and she needed to do some planning of her own, we could actually get the estate back below the £2 million threshold. It's something that we always look at straight away. And we always use this mantra, if it's not on file, it didn't happen. So make sure that you've discussed that with a potential client where you identify a deed of variation could be useful. Now, with regard to that, it is a legal framework that allows you to change the terms of an existing will or trust. And it can be used to alter that distribution of assets, add beneficiaries, etc. So you can protect those assets better than they would be if they just all landed in somebody's estate. You can also use it to vary an intestacy, and that's often something that isn't understood or considered or even known, from that perspective. But it's massively important to consider a deed of variation because varying it can massively alter the tax efficiency of the frameworks. Like that example that I've just given, we were taking £750,000 out of a client's estate immediately by doing a deed of variation. And it can help you to demonstrate your knowledge in this area, strengthen the intergenerational family links because you're assisting them to make sure that those assets flow through their family as tax efficiently as possible. And I would always say, if you can find it or ensure that the trust that you vary that into has got the ability to loan as well as appoint money, that is particularly useful. The trust will have a 125-year perpetuity period and could keep loaning money to successive generations. And again, at the trustee's discretion, those loans could be non-interest bearing with no repayment schedule. So it's just a sum of money that they owe back to the trust at some future point. So it makes an awful lot of sense to consider that. first and foremost, where you identify a client has inherited money within the last 2 years. It shouldn't be relied on. It isn't a substitute for good lifetime planning, but it is, to use the monopoly term, the get out of jail card if it hasn't actually been done in the first place, and somebody either hasn't updated their will or the will hasn't been written as tax efficiently as it could be, and it can be varied, and we can do something with that. So wealth has a massive impact on life expectancy. So the first thing that I would normally do when I'm talking to a provider about a case is look at average life expectancy for that particular client. But wealth has a huge, huge impact on that. And it's probably not a surprise when we think about people with wealth tend to have better lifestyles, more assets to sustain themselves, have the best possible standard of care in later life, etc. So they've got all of these things that help them survive longer than the average. So this is a map of the Greater Manchester Tram Network, purely and simply to demonstrate that this research was done by Manchester University about the impact of wealth on life expectancy. So if we look at a male in Rochdale, has an average life expectancy, quite shockingly, of only 66. But if we go through to Timperley, which is a much wealthier area, it's 78. So we've got 12 years difference in life expectancy in 10 tram stops. It'll probably take you 45 minutes to go from one to the other. If you then look at females, it's not quite as stark. It's only 9 years, but it's only 4 tram stops difference to get a 9-year difference in life expectancy. So wealth has a huge impact. The wealthier somebody is, the more likely they are to live beyond the average. So looking at average life expectancy is a starting point, but you can actually start to get it down to more localized levels. You can get it down to constituencies, etc. And that helps massively to be able to then look at how long is that client likely to live. And if they're in normal health for their age, they're likely to live longer if they've got more money. It's as simple as that. So when we start to look at wealth preservation and passing money through the generations, once you've identified the client's got an IHT liability, say the first thing that comes up is, well, I might need it, so I don't want to give it all away and lose access to it. And again, factor in the whole foreseeable harm aspect there as well, and the access to money, because they might need to pay for care. But once we've got over that hurdle, as it were, in terms of the discussion about how we can gift money away and retain access to it, the next thing that often comes up is, well, I don't want to give money away directly, because if I give it to my kids and they get divorced, half of what I've given them could be disappearing out of the family. And anybody that's ever happened to will offer that up immediately as to why they're not going to give any more money away. So divorce is a big concern for lots of people, and wealthy people in particular are very concerned about giving money to the kids, large sums of money, and seeing it disappear out of the family. We've got bankruptcy as well, and hopefully this is relatively rare, but of course it does happen, and you could lose 100% of any money you've given to somebody if they're then declared bankrupt. And then we've got care fee assessment of the beneficiary. Hopefully that obviously been much later in life, but if you've given someone an awful lot of money or left them an awful lot of money, and they need care in later life, obviously it's going to affect their care costs being assessed by the local authority, and they will take that money into account. And then we've got sideways disinheritance, and this occurs where we've got blended families. So we've got a couple that get together, they get married, and they've got kids from previous relationships. And if they just do very simple mirror wills, as lots of people have, on first death, everything passed to the surviving spouse. Surviving spouse then leaves all the money to his or her kids and disinherits the kids on the other side completely. That does happen. It happens too often. But again, if we can factor that into the whole planning process, when we start to look at trusts, we can mitigate that situation. And then we've got the whole transfer of wealth. I'm looking at this, £5.5 trillion set to pass in the next 30 years. If we just keep pushing that money into successive estates, it's just going to inflate the estates of all of those future generations. And therefore, it's just going to add to the IHT tax take all of the time. And understandably, people want to pass as much money onto their kids and their grandkids and keep passing it through the generations as tax efficiently as possible. And that's exactly what we look at. So, Lee, if I hand over to you for the first poll, if I may.
Yeah, of course. So are you moving forward with IHT planning? So just a quick one on this poll, guys and girls. Just quick fire, 30 seconds is all we'll let this poll run for. What do you expect to see from this, John?
I'm expecting to see quite a lot saying yes, because they've died pre-75 in this particular situation. So we are seeing a situation where the person who's inherited the pension could draw it income tax free and IHT free. But post 6th of April 2027, it will form part of the IHT and residence nil rate band assessable estate. So I'm expecting most people will say yes, they are moving forward with that. But I can quite understand why some people are unsure, with regards to what they should be doing. And that's obviously, hopefully, what we'll clarify in the next little bit of the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just stop it there for the purpose of the content that we want to get through. So yeah, 70% of the market said, or 70% of the audience said yes, 5% said no, 26% said unsure. So hopefully, as we work through this, it will clarify some of those unshores and no's.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody, for that. I don't know if I need to. Oh, there we go. So what now for pensions is the big question. Let's look at the impact on inherited pension value. So let's say, for example, all of their allowances are already taken up for this particular client by all the other assets, and the pension falling on top of it is just going to be the bit that's going to become IHT accessible. And if we look at it in that context, we know there's going to be a 40% charge on the pension fund from an IHT perspective. But what we then have to factor in, if we're looking at the client has died over the age of 75, the beneficiaries are then going to be subject to income tax when they start to draw the pension. So we've now got an IHT charge and an income tax charge. If we then start to look at that and say, well, if the beneficiaries were basic rate taxpayers when they're drawing this pension fund down, we've got a 52% tax charge on it when we take into account IHT and basic rate tax as we're drawing it down. If the beneficiaries were higher rate taxpayers, that goes up to 64% tax charge on the fund. And of course, if we then push somebody into additional rate tax, that's a 67% tax charge on the pension fund. Now, there will be some people who very foolishly don't take advice at this point, and they will draw a very large pension fund and push themselves into being additional rate taxpayers because they haven't taken the advice. They've just taken it out, not realizing that the implications, who will push themselves into that 67% tax bracket. And as horrific as that looks, it isn't actually the worst case scenario. So if we then consider members died over 75, the beneficiaries are subject to income tax as a drawing it, but we've lost all of the residence nil rate band because of the size of the estate that's been left, and it's been either above 2.35 million if it's a single person or 2.7 million if it was a married couple or civil partnership. You've lost all the residence nil rate band, it's tapered away to zero. So if we then factor that in and say there's an IHT charge, a basic rate tax charge, and you've lost all the residence nil rate band, there's a 72% tax charge on that pension fund, which would then increase to 84 if they are higher rate taxpayers, and 87 if they are additional rate taxpayers, which are just horrific charges. And when you get to the upper end of the additional rate taxpayers, if you also then factor in the loss of the personal allowance, when you get over 100,000, you're actually looking at a tax charge, effective tax charge of 92% on the pension fund. Absolutely horrific. And that's why people are starting to look at the pension fund to say, I cannot leave that where it is. We're going to need to start to draw that. The difficulty, I think, for advisors at the moment is this whole situation where, at the moment, that pension fund isn't forming part of somebody's IHT and residence nil rate band assessable estate. But we know it's set to, because of course we haven't seen any legislation yet, but it's set to come into force, these new rules on the 6th of April 2027. So if somebody dies on the 5th of April 2027, the pension fund isn't forming part of their IHT assessable estate. They die after midnight on the 5th of April 2027, and therefore obviously we're into the 6th of April 2027, the pension fund in its entirety is in the estate. And it really is cliff edge moment. One day it isn't, one day it is. And that's going to have a dramatic effect on the IHT efficiency of the pension fund, and also on somebody's estate and the IHT liability that they could be subject to. And we start to look at these figures here. So I think there's difficulty for advisors at the moment as to what to do. My suggestion really is to look for the legislation to be confirmed, because again, it isn't unheard of for things to be kicked along the road a little bit. So I'd wait for the legislation to be confirmed. But once that legislation is confirmed, if the client's got significant life expectancy beyond April 2027, it makes absolute sense to me to start to look at the pension fund and get ahead of that curve, because it's all going to drop inside the estate on the 6th of April 2027. So if a client is 60 with 25 years life expectancy, it makes absolute sense to me to start to look at the pension fund if that's going to cause them a big problem. And we keep coming across people who've got significant pension funds running into millions. And it's a lot of those people, I'm genuinely staggered at how many there are, have put money into pension because it was tax efficient to do so. I could take 25% of tax-free cash, PCLS, up to certain limits now, of course. But I had no intention of drawing the pension fund. The whole idea of it was actually just to pass it on tax efficiently to the kids or grandkids. Whereas now, from 6th of April 2027, we know that that's absolutely going to be turned on its head. So I used to talk about pensions and trusts as being a pot of last resort. Just don't touch them, leave them where they are as long as you possibly can, and spend all the other assets you've got inside the estate first. And let's get the estate value down. Because of these changes, it's going to be imperative for people to consider what they're going to do with the pension fund going forward. As I say, as soon as that legislation is confirmed, and we know the date is going to be the 6th of April 2027, and we know what the legislation is looking at, it makes absolute sense to start to consider what we're going to do with those pension funds. There is also another sort of small area of planning that you need to be aware of as well, where the member has died pre-75. So the beneficiaries can inherit that pension fund IHT free and income tax free, and draw it income tax free. Now, that's going to change in terms of the IHT efficiency of it, again from the 6th of April 2027. So it's going to fall inside their estate. They can draw that as tax-free income and income tax-free going forward, but it will form part of their IHT assessable estate of the recipient beneficiary or beneficiaries. So again, it makes absolute sense to start to consider to draw that now. You can draw it tax-free as income, and you can gift it away as income using the gifts from normal expenditure rules. It's coming into the estate and you're taken out of the estate immediately, but it has to be drawn as income on a regular basis. You can't draw it as one big lump sum and then say, well, I'm going to give it away monthly and that's classed as income. No, it has to be drawn as income and gifted as income to be able to qualify for the gifts from normal expenditure rules. So if we look, what does a typical WAY client look like? Most of them are over 55, most of them in the 60s. They've got children and grandchildren, which is why they're motivated to do the IHT planning in the first place. They're typically pre or post-retirement, and they're often professionals or business owners, which again, not surprising because they're the people who built the wealth. So when we start to look at capital, they've often recently inherited from their parents. And because people are living longer, that means that, of course, we are seeing more and more people inheriting in their 50s, 60s, sometimes in their 70s, because their parents are living into their 90s at a time when they don't need it, which again takes us back to the whole deed of variation. Can we do that first and foremost? Can we take the money away from them, skip them completely, or put it in a trust that they could benefit from if they ever needed it? But don't leave it in their estate if you can do a deed of variation. Pretty often, it's too late, it's gone beyond the 2 years and the money's in their estate, so they now have to do the planning with it, and that's where we can start to plan using into VIVOS periods, etc. Often they've sold a business and they may well have lost all the business relief. When they've sold a business relief qualifying business, and of course they could use rollover relief to go into another business relief qualifying investment. But again, as we saw earlier, there's going to be restrictions on that to get full 100% IHT relief from 6th of April next year. It'll be a maximum of £1 million. So often they're looking at, well, what else can we do beyond that? They've often downsized, sold a second property, sold a buy-to-let portfolio to create this capital that they can now do the planning with. High value ISAs, we mentioned earlier, we see huge amounts of these where people have got 700,000, £800,000, £1 million plus in ISA holdings, all inside the IHT accessible estate. And if you've got somebody with £1 million in their ISA, invariably most of them are using their allowances elsewhere, because to build up £1 million in ISA portfolios, they're typically obviously a wealthy client. But that £1 million ISA portfolio is actually only really worth 600,000 in the hands of the beneficiaries. And when you point that out to the client, that changes the dynamic on how efficient ISAs are as a tax efficient vehicle. They are very, very tax efficient while you're alive. And if you're going to draw income from it and spend it, very, very tax efficient. But if they're not, they are very IHT inefficient. And therefore, planning with the ISAs, the beauty of planning with the ISAs is the fact, of course, you can take the money out of it without any CGT consideration. We can gift the money into trust. We could even invest in the same funds invariably that they are invested in their ISA portfolio through the trust. So we're not changing the risk profile, but we're dramatically changing the IHT position of that money if they survive that 7-year inter vivos period. And then when we start to look at excess income, our biggest area for this historically has been clients who have got very good final salary pension schemes. And we know we're in the last generation of those people. But we've got lots of retired medical professionals who've got very, very good income. And it's not uncommon for us to find they've got £100,000 a year of pension income. It's index linked. They're often married to somebody else who was also a medical professional. So they've got, £200,000 plus of index linked pension income. And they often say this is coming in too fast. And it's hardly surprising that that's the rate. But of course, if they've got surplus income, we can gift it away using the gifts from normal expenditure rules. Get that money immediately outside of the estate. There's no inter vivos period on excess income gifts, provided you can prove it's surplus. Could be investment income, so it could be investments that are generating income through dividends, etc. Earned income from salary is, obviously a pretty obvious one. But again, we've got people with very high earnings, get very good bonuses, and therefore are putting money into this trust that we've got. High dividend income, as I mentioned, rental income from buy-to-let property portfolios, again, is not uncommon. And all of these things are all accessible for income, and therefore could be used to support gifts from normal expenditure. So from a planning perspective, loan trusts, we've seen a massive surge in interest in loan trusts because of the consumer duty foreseeable harm aspect. And what we use it as typically is a holding vehicle for rounds 2 or 3 of nil rate band planning. So let's say a client is age 60, they've got 25 years life expectancy. That means they can use and recycle a nil rate band 3 times during a lifetime. So gift it, survive 7 years, redo it, live another 7 years, taking you to 14, redo it, taking you to 21, and then you've got your nil rate band back still for use on demise or to continue doing planning with. So our loan trusts, we actually don't see many people taking money out of them. Typically, people have put money into a loan trust and taken a 5% tax-deferred income from a bond. Ours aren't really used like that. Ours are really being used as holding vehicles for rounds 2, 3, and maybe longer of nil rate band recycling. So what we're trying to do at that point is, again, consumer duty foreseeable harm. We're getting all of the growth outside of the estate immediately, but we've still got access to the original loan. So again, from the access to money perspective, they've still got access to that original loan. So we'd always start with, let's make sure we've got a rainy day fund of whatever makes the client feel comfortable. Then everything over and above what we're going to gift can go into the loan trust, getting all the growth on that outside the estate, but they've still got access to all of the original loan at any time. So again, consumer duty foreseeable harm. We're making sure they've got access to money, but we're mitigating the tax aspects and the IHT on that money that they've got. We don't want to leave it sat in ISAs and GIAs inside the estate, continuing to accumulate in value and destroying some of the planning that we're going to put in place to mitigate the IHT. So then we've got gifts from normal expenditure, and this is obviously about capital. It's all about identifying the surplus income. So you can give away an unlimited amount of surplus income, and it's immediately exempt from your estate, provided you follow these 3 very simple rules. It's got to be regular, or the intention is it's going to be a regular pattern of gifting. It's got to be from surplus net income, so it's got to be income that you are receiving as natural income. And that can include the PCLS drawdown, taking 25% tax-free, as long as you're drawing it as income. You can gift that away, or like we mentioned, those people where the pension members died pre-75 and the beneficiaries could draw the income from the pension fund tax-free and gift it. It still qualifies for the surplus income definition, as long as it doesn't impact on the standard of living. So HMRC have a form called an IHT 403. The IHT 403 is what you would use to demonstrate somebody's surplus income post their demise. We've just taken the back page of the IHT 403, which is an income and expenditure analysis per tax year, put it into a self-calculating workbook, Excel workbook, and therefore you just put in their income sources, their expenditure, and it will self-calculate what the surplus is for that particular year. That's what you can give away. The little known thing is that HMRC will allow you to go back 2 complete tax years. So at the minute, we could go back to the 23, 24, 24, 25 tax years and say this was accumulated undistributed surplus income from those tax years. And you can give that away under the gifts from normal expenditure rules. So it's immediately exempt, provided it's your intention that you're going to continue to make regular patterns of gifting. Those gifts are going to be surplus net income going forward, and it doesn't impact on the standard of living. So we often do that where we're kicking it off with a lump sum because most of these people haven't just suddenly got surplus income. They've had it for years. Anything older than 2 years, 2 tax years old, HMRC consider that as capital. But you can go back those 2 tax years, mop up anything that they've got as accumulated but undistributed surplus income from those 2 tax years, give it away as a lump sum immediately outside the estate, and then we continue to make regular gifts. And people have been available, and this has been available to do since 1984, but it is honestly the most underutilized IHT mitigation strategy by a mile. And what we've done is just wrap the trust around it. So they've gifted this surplus income away. It's all immediately exempt, and it's inside a trust wrapper. And what we've then got is a deferrable reversion back to the settler from the 5th anniversary. So you can have up to 50% of the accumulated value on the 5th anniversary, with the other 50% available at year 10. If the settler doesn't want it, they would advise us as the trustees, as the in-house professional trustee service. They don't want it via their advisor, and we would defer that reversion to a later date. Typically, we just roll it back a year. So following year, they've got 50% available at year 6 if they need it, in whole or part. If they don't need any of it, roll it back and just keep rolling it back. And then from year 10, we might have 100% potentially available on each anniversary or anything in between if they ever needed it. But most of these people continue to have surplus income unless they then go into care, and then their surplus income is all being used up, and we might start to access the trust to help pay for care costs. And then we've got loans or appointments to beneficiaries at any time too. Now, loans is underlined for a reason. If you appoint money from a trust, it is exited the trust and it can never come back in again. And therefore, it's in their hands. So if they get divorced, they go bankrupt, they need care, they've got their own IHT liabilities, it's all adding to their IHT assessable estate as well as their assets in all of those circumstances. Whereas if we loan the money to the beneficiaries, they have the use of the money, but it is a debt. They will sign a loan agreement with the trustees. The loans can be non-interest bearing with no repayment schedule. And therefore, if they get divorced, they go bankrupt, they need care, they've got their own IHT liabilities. This was just a loan. I owe this money back to the trust. It's not my money. Wealthy people love that, to be able to get money to their kids or grandkids to help them buy houses. And we've done it where we're helping with a significant deposit for the house. We are helping to pay a chunk off the mortgage because, of course, interest rates have gone up and people are coming to the end of fixed rate deals, so they can take a chunk off the mortgage and help them out and keep their repayments where they were. And fairly regular is to buy a house outright with no mortgage. So money's coming into the trust. We've got a mature trust typically, and we want to help out. And it's very often a grandchild to buy a house outright with no mortgage. We loan them £300,000 from the trust, say. They can buy the house. It's in their name. It's their assets, but they owe £300,000 back to the trust. There's no interest being charged. There's no repayment schedule. They just owe £300,000 back to the trust. So if they keep that loan for the rest of their life, that just nets off against the estate and their assets for the rest of their life. So if they got married and then divorced in 30 years' time, the £300,000 loan they've had, they still owe back to the trust. So we're protecting that family wealth intergenerationally. And then we've got capital, where we're looking to give capital sums away. This would be a chargeable lifetime transfer, so you don't really want to exceed the £325,000 allowance. You can push the envelope a little bit by saying, well, we could add the annual gift exemptions for the current tax year and the last tax year as an exempt gift, so you can max it out to £331,000. Anything above that would then be subject to a 20% entry tax charge. So people don't typically do that because you are literally forward paying your IHT liability. So most people are keeping it, well, 99.99% of people are keeping it to 325 or 331 max. So let's say we're gifting 325, a nil rate band over, pass it over to the trustees, which again is us as the in-house professional trustees. We'll typically split those parcels down into 10% per annum because all of our trusts invest in collectives as opposed to an investment bond, and therefore are CGT assessable, not income tax assessable. So we typically split the parcels down into 10%, keeps the maths nice and simple for the client. It's 10% of the value that could come back each year if they need it. But 97% of the people that invest in this trust never take any money out of it. But we show it an example here. They might say, well, I don't need 10%, but I wouldn't mind 2%. Okay, well, the trustees will release 2%. That's the bit that's the CGT assessable for the gain. And then we defer the 8% to a later date. And we'll typically just roll it back to the following year. So now there's 18% there. Do you need it? No, I don't need anything this year. Well, we'll take all that 18% and roll it back to the following year. We've now got 28. Take 3% in that particular year. And therefore, the following year, we've got 35%. And as we saw in the previous trust, we can make loans or appointments to beneficiaries at any time. And we typically loan the money for exactly the same reason. Say those trusts have got a 125-year perpetuity period. So we could keep loaning money to successive generations without that money forming part of their IHT assessable estate or their assets. And therefore, we can protect that family wealth in the event of divorce, bankruptcy, care costs, and IHT. So we only ever do single settler trusts. And the reason we do single settler trusts is because we've got more flexibility. So on the left-hand side here, the grey boxes, if Mr. and Mrs. B are joint settlers and Mr. B passes away, we've got no additional flexibility because Mrs. B is one of the original settlers of that trust. Whereas on the right-hand side in the blue and red boxes, if we split that out into single settler trusts and Mr. B passes away, we can now add Mrs. B into the appointed class of beneficiaries on a husband's trust, which means we can loan money to Mrs. B, which of course is forming part of is not forming part of her estate, is a debt against her estate, and therefore can mitigate IHT ultimately on her demise. So the two examples I always use here are my own parents and my mother-in-law. So my own parents, the predominant pension benefit was on my dad. So if my dad had passed before my mum would have seen a 50% drop in pension income overnight. She still had all the household expenses, but you got 50% less income. If mum then suddenly needs money, you could loan money to mum from dad's trust. She spends that as income because she needs it, but she's leaving the debt attaching to the estate, which is mitigating the IHT liability. And the other one being my mother-in-law, who outlived her husband by 25 years or more. Again, if you just pass all the assets over, and at a time when you've got frozen nil rate bands and the assets are continuing to go up in value, that just means the IHT liability is getting worse. But if she needed income, we could loan money to her from my late husband's trust, creating a debt against her estate and reducing the IHT liability ultimately on her demise. So it's much better to have single settler trust than it is to have joint settler trust. So when we start to look at trust planning, the key to this and the key to the success of it and how we can make it most tax efficient is to get the order of the gifting correct. So the first thing we'd look at is a loan trust, because you've not gifted anything away, you've only made a loan. So that trust will get a full nil rate band at each 10-yearly periodic charge assessment, and you're only assessing the growth because, of course, the loan is still attaching to the settled estate. So you're only ever assessing the growth. And then we'd look at gifts from normal expenditure because that's immediately exempt, and it doesn't accumulate with the earlier trust because you haven't made a gift, and the second trust is an immediately exempt trust. So that also gets a full nil rate band at every 10-year periodic charge assessment. Then we would make a chargeable lifetime transfer, so a capital gift. You keep it within a nil rate band, there's no entry tax charge. And therefore, that trust will also get a full nil rate band because it doesn't accumulate with the earlier trust because the one before it was immediately exempt and the one before that you haven't made a gift. So getting those order is crucial to make sure all three of those trusts all get a nil rate band each. You could then make pets after that, and you could literally settle these trusts and make these gifts on 4 consecutive days. They are not then related settlements. If you did a pet immediately after the chargeable lifetime transfer, the day after that, you've extended the inter vivos period of the CLT, the chargeable lifetime transfer, by a day. So if you make a pet within the inter vivos period of a chargeable lifetime transfer, you extend the inter vivos period of the chargeable lifetime transfer from the date of the pet, which we'll look at in a second. That's where you get this so-called 14-year rule. So ordering the gifts in the order above is crucial to get a nil rate band for each one of those trusts at every 10-year periodic charge assessment. If you alter the order of 1, 2, and 3 and put number 3 first, the only trust that would get a nil rate band at each 10-yearly periodic charge assessment will be the inheritor gift trust or chargeable lifetime transfer where you've gifted capital away. The other trust wouldn't, because you've got the order wrong. So it's absolutely crucial to get the order of the gifting right. So if we look at this 14-year rule and an example, and we'll literally take it to its extremity as to where and how you get to 14 years. So in this example, the settlor makes a chargeable lifetime transfer on the 1st of May 2025. So the inter vivos period therefore runs for 7 years till midnight on the 1st of May 2032. But if that settlor were to make a PET on the 30th of April 2032, so the day before the chargeable lifetime transfer inter vivos period to expire, the inter vivos period on the PET runs to the 30th of April 2039. If the client were to die before midnight on the 30th of April 2039, the PET fails. So you go back to the original PET date of the 30th of April 2032 to say, did the client make any chargeable lifetime transfers in the preceding 7 years? And in that case, they would. So that trust that was set up on the 1st of May 2025 would still be in the IHT assessable estate, because of the fact they've made a PET within the inter vivos period of a chargeable lifetime transfer. So again, crucial to make sure that clients understand that if they do a chargeable lifetime transfer, they either want to make PETs very soon afterwards to keep the window narrow, or not make any PETs at all until the chargeable lifetime transfer gift inter vivos period has expired. So Lee, pass you over again for a poll.
We've got another poll. We are approaching the 10 o'clock mark, so I think we're on to what I believe is the case study part. Is that right, John?
Yeah.
Perfect. So look, if you can hang around and see a live case study, that would be amazing, but also appreciate that some of you got to shoot off. So if you can hang around, please stay with us and we'll run through a case study. And as I said, there'll be a Q&A section towards the end. Please do continue to participate in the survey at the end. If you want to hear more from the guys or us at the club, please do. Take 2 minutes to complete that form. That'd be amazing. So hopefully your confidence in IHT legislation after today's event has broadened your knowledge, and you're now feeling a little bit more confident. Which we can see here, John, you're doing a sterling job. 75% are yes, 25% are somewhat. So, you know, people are obviously seeing the content very valuable. I know a lot of people have asked for the slides as well. So again, we will get the slides over to anybody who just puts a note in the comment section, or we'll probably make it available to everybody, as it seemed to be very popular.
What I'll do now is I'll skip through to that case study because I'm conscious that
I've lost the sound, John.
Oh, can you hear me again now?
Yeah, we got you. We'll make the slides available to everybody if that seems to be, yep, slides, yep. Okay, we'll make the slides available to everyone.
As I've mentioned, the loan facility is the key to making this wealth pass through intergenerationally, and we really, really do, encourage people to look at that.
We've lost the sound a little bit, mate.
Oh, have you? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's loud and clear. Yep.
Yeah, so if we look at £1 million, if we were to pass that through the generations just using a nil rate band each time and not being able to loan money, we see that actually over time that wealth is more than halving as it passes through one generation to the next. It inflates the next generation's estate, but one nil rate band to offset against it, and it just halves. Whereas if we can just keep loaning money, we can keep that wealth within the family. It's not leaking out in inheritance tax every time it goes through one generation. So I'll skip through that. The main thing with regards to the professional trustee service is it just makes everybody's life easier, and we have better client outcomes because we do all the registration of the trust TRS, we do all the drafting of the documentation, ensure CGT allowances are used each year, etc., etc. So we do all of that. But if we look at this case study, and this is a contrived case study to make a point, let's look at this particular couple. They're both age 60. They've got very good life expectancy, good income. They've got 2 children, 2 grandchildren. The total estate tops up to 2.7 million. And that's used as a figure specifically to demonstrate the fact they've lost all the residence nil rate band. So they've tapered it all away because their estate above £2 million and it tapers away. So they've lost all the residence nil rate band. So their IHT liability at this point is 820,000. Now they could move their ISAs into an AIM ISA, but of course, the next April it's only going to get 50% IHT relief. But crucially, it does nothing whatsoever for the value of the estate with regards to the residence nil rate band, because of course you can't put an ISA in a trust, and therefore that money is theirs and part of their residence nil rate band assessable estate. If we bring all the things we've looked at today together and look at multiple trust planning for these clients, we can immediately reclaim their residence nil rate band. So we're going to look at putting £350,000 each into loan trusts. So they've still got access to that, as well as the money they've got on deposit. They've got surplus income that we've identified, so they're going to give away £60,000 of surplus income, £30,000 each, and they're going to put £331,000 each into a WAY Inheritor Gift Trust, chargeable lifetime transfer, immediately removed from the residence nil rate band assessable estate calculation. Not the IHT calculation, but the residence nil rate band assessable estate is immediately reduced. The minute you gift something, you don't own it any longer, and therefore it comes out of the residence nil rate band assessable estate. So for these clients, overnight, we've got their estate from 2.7 million back to below 2 million. We've reclaimed all of their residence nil rate band, which gives them £350,000 of allowance each. That's £140,000 IHT saving. We've got £60,000 of surplus income we've gifted away, which is another 40% IHT saving. That's 24,000. And then we've got £12,000 of annual gift exemptions tied up in that £331,000 each gifted, which is another £4,800 saving. So that gets to a total of £168,800 IHT saving overnight. So again, with a bit of planning, we've transformed that client's IHT liability from being a massive liability to actually getting them to a point where we've got them all of their residence nil rate band back overnight, saved 140,000, used the gifts and normal expenditure rules, used their annual gift allowances for the last 2 years, and we've got an overnight saving of £168,800. So massive change to their situation. And that's the sort of planning that we look at when we sit down with an advisor to look at a case. How can we make their assets work better for them and for their family to mitigate their IHT liability? And let's get their IHT liability down as low as we can, whilst retaining access to the money for themselves and for their children. And again, just making sure we comply with the whole consumer duty foreseeable harm aspects, that we've looked at everything. If these clients said, I don't want to do all of that, if you've made that recommendation to the client, make sure it's on file, and I'd get them to sign that they've decided that they didn't want to proceed with it if you ever get to that point. It does happen occasionally, but at least, again, from a consumer duty foreseeable harm aspect, you can demonstrate beyond any reasonable doubt to the regulator or to the beneficiaries that you considered all of these things, you made these recommendations, and the clients didn't want to proceed. And in that situation, you're covered. But in my experience, most people, when you start to point out the sorts of things we could do like this, go ahead with the planning because they know that that money is available to them. And that's us for today. I shall just pass you back to Lee. I shall whiz you through what we've done for me, what we've looked at today. As I say, we'll send all of these slides through. And if you require any assistance, that's, Mark, myself, and Nathan, our CEO. And I think there was a final poll, wasn't there, Lee, that we wanted to do?
There is indeed. So now the presentation has come to an end. Are you more likely to recommend the use of multiple trusts to your clients? And appreciate every single one of you that have hung about a little bit over the 11 o'clock. John, you've done amazing to nip that in the bud within 60 minutes, mate. I know there was so much more that you could have said and told and showed people, but appreciate you're getting it done within the hour. So look, amazing. Really good feedback on the on this last poll as well, with people more likely to recommend the use of multiple trusts. So that's really, really good. And thank you for everybody for participating in all of the polls. Now's a good time where you've got the guys with you. If you have any questions at all, please do fire away at any questions that you might have. John and Mark are here. If you do have to shoot off, thank you very much for joining us all again. If you'd like to rewatch the webinar, it will be up on our website later on today. You'll also get an email with a link to watch the webinar. We'll make sure the slide deck is available to everybody as well. So if you've got any questions, please do fire away. If not, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. The sun is shining. I think a lot of people are going to be spending a lot of time outdoors, which is very, very nice. Certificate, yes, David, CPD certificates. You'll also get an email with a link for you to complete your CPD certificate, which we will send to you all. Amazing. What I'll do for the purpose, I'll just stop the recording.